Are you keeping up with the Targaryen family drama in House of the Dragon? You might be surprised to know that George R.R. Martin actually borrowed from a real-life historical hard-ass, Empress Matilda, when he was crafting the character of Rhaenyra Targaryen. Curious about the other parallels in their life? Well, you've come to the right place. Let's spill the 12th century tea together, shall we? Hi, I'm Katy from Queen's Podcast, and join me today as we take a whirlwind tour through the life and times of the real-life Empress Matilda. This video is a bit high level, but if you want all the juicy details, over on Queen's Podcast, we do have a 3-parter on Empress Matilda. So if you're here for the details, head to that series. The link is in the description. But today, we are going to set the scene for a historical battle known simply as the Anarchy, and the spurned woman who lives in the center of this story. Princess Matilda was born in 1102. Her father was Henry I, King of England, and her mother was Matilda of Scotland. The king and queen had one other child together, a son named William. Now, something we need to know about King Henry's reign is that his dynasty was young. His dad was this guy named William the Conqueror, which kind of sounds like Aegon the Conqueror, who George R.R. Martin definitely borrowed from when crafting that character. So now that Dad Henry is feeling like his throne isn't super sturdy in England, he is eager to make alliances with more established dynasties throughout Europe. When the Holy Roman Emperor, this guy named Henry V, says, "Hey, I'm looking for a wife," Henry I of England is so quick to throw his daughter Matilda's name in the running as a candidate. The good news here is that these folks aren't practicing brother-sister marriages like we see in House of the Dragon. I actually believe that is borrowed from ancient Egypt, and more specifically, the Ptolemies of ancient Egypt, but that is another story for another time. The bad news is Matilda is only 8 years old. 8 years old when she is betrothed, aka engaged, to Henry, the Holy Roman Emperor, and shipped off to Germany to learn how to be wife and empress. 8 years old. Not a fan. Not a fan of that. Matilda did serve as Holy Roman Empress until she was 23. At that time, her husband died, and since she had no children with him, she was packed up and sent back to England. However, the England she returned to was a much more chaotic place than when she left. In 1120, there was a tragedy known as the White Ship Disaster. The TLDR on the White Ship Disaster is that one day, Henry I's entire court was traveling from England to France. The king and his crew took one boat home, and they decided to let the younger generation take a second boat home. This was a party ship. This was the White Ship. And when I say party, I am not exaggerating. Wine, barrels on barrels on barrels. It is wine o'clock forever on the White Ship. The Wine Ship. There's about 300 people on this boat, and every single one of them is wasted. And who is the ringleader of the party boat? William, Matilda's younger brother and heir to the throne of England. Fun fact, maybe this will come up again later, Matilda and William have a cousin named Stephen. He was supposed to be on the White Ship, but he got too drunk before the boat ever took off, and he got sick to his stomach, and he decided to stay behind and catch another ship another day. Maybe this will be important later. Yeah, this boat sank. The White Ship sunk, and there was only one survivor of the 300 passengers. There was a butcher that wasn't drinking that day, and he was the only one that lived to tell the tale. And this is a problem, because now there is no clear heir to the throne of England. Now let me tell you what. Henry I, he was a ladies' man. He loved the ladies, and the ladies loved him. He was at no loss for children. He had as many as 20 illegitimate children. This king fucked. You know, I hate the term illegitimate. Just because your parents weren't married doesn't make you not a legitimate person. But in the eyes of inheritance, medieval times in Europe, your parents had to be married. So even though he's got these 20 kids running around, he's got no one to inherit the throne of England. Matilda's mom, Queen Matilda of Scotland, had passed away a while ago. Henry had never bothered to remarry, but now he's got this succession problem, so he does exactly that. King Henry marries a young and beautiful noblewoman named Adeliza of Louvain, assuming a son would come soon after. But years passed, and no children came. Being that Henry had so many other children, he had never had problems getting the ladies with child. It was assumed that this was an Adeliza problem. But Henry was like, I'm not trying to get an annulment. I'm getting up there in age. This is exhausting. We just need to come up with a plan B. Plan B, he names an heir, his daughter Matilda. On Christmas Day, 1126, Henry gathered all his barons and he had them all swear to Matilda. In total, he had his barons do this 3 times. 3 times to really drive it home. Like, look, guys, I know this is unconventional, but I am fucking serious. Okay, but why would he need to do this? Because uterus. Sure. Now when we think of the famous monarchs of England, we're probably thinking Elizabeth I, Elizabeth II, Queen Victoria. But at the time, the idea of a woman ruling, not being a regent, not being a consort, but actually being like the head bitch in charge, the actual de facto ruler, was a wild idea. This was a radical thought. But now he has it confirmed. He has everybody swear it. He can now rest easy knowing that he has done his best to ensure a peaceful transfer of power. So now he needs to find Matilda a rich and powerful husband who is well connected. He marries Matilda off to Geoffrey of Anjou. We won't have time to go into it. These two hated each other. But we're going to do some skimming. What you need to know is they had 3 boys who were healthy, and for the contemporary time, that made it a successful marriage. But now she has sons. She's got an heir, she's got a spare, and then she has a spare to spare. Now her claim is that much more secure because men in history would literally rather put an infant on the throne than a woman. Y'all, I am so serious. Google the number of 1-year-olds who have had coronations. Like, you are our king. You will learn to walk, but she will never learn not to have a uterus. Anyway, in 1135, King Henry dies really unexpectedly. He ate too many eels? I'm not mad at George R.R. Martin not borrowing that piece of history, if I'm being honest. This is the 12th century. There's no phone. There's no email. What I'm getting at is it was weeks, if not months, before Matilda even knew that her dad was dead. And she was pregnant, like heavily pregnant, and living in Normandy or Anjou at the time. She was in France. It doesn't matter. But anyway, these barons have swore to her 3 times. So she's not stressed. She's not rushing to get over there. Remember the lightweight cousin who couldn't hold his liquor and didn't get on the white ship and so survived? So that is Stephen. He was conveniently with Henry while he was on his deathbed. Wouldn't you know it, on his deathbed, Henry was like, hey, Stephen, forget what I've said before. I want you to be my heir. And how convenient. Only you and people who are on your payroll are here to hear it. How convenient. Isn't that funny how that worked out? So before Matilda, I don't know, maybe even knows her dad is dead, Stephen has said, this is mine now. And he becomes king. He has a coronation. And everyone's just like, oh, Matilda is pissed when she finds out, unsurprisingly. Maybe if Matilda would have had a cooler head, we could avoid what is about to happen. Empress Matilda can be described a lot of ways. Pragmatic, even-tempered. These are not words to describe Empress Matilda. Our girl saw red. And as soon as she recovered from the birth of her last son, it's time for war. Again, since this is an overview, we're not going to go into every single detail, but this is really at the crux of the comparison between this story and House of the Dragon, the Dance of the Dragons. Because of this either deathbed last minute decision or someone's full-on betrayal, or maybe even a misunderstanding like in House of the Dragon, England and even some parts of Normandy are now part of a full-on civil war. This civil war is known historically as the Anarchy, and in its contemporary time was even called the time when Christ and his saints slept. That's given you a vibe of how like the everyday people were feeling during this civil war, which went on for 19 years. This is 19 years of scorched earth medieval fighting. We have neighbor versus neighbor, cousin versus cousin. Unfortunately, the people that really pay the price in these civil wars, a duke versus an empress living in a castle, the people that really pay the price are the everyday people. In House of the Dragon, they call them the small folk. So I really do hope in this season, as the Civil War in House of the Dragon plays on, they do show the plight of just the everyday people. I mean, yeah, a lot of the noble families lost family members, lost loved ones, but it's the farmer that was getting their crops just burnt to shit. 20 years. Nearly. Obviously, there's a lot of things from this time that we're not going to get to go over during this video, but here are some things we're going to skip over. Badass queens. Everyone in this story is named Matilda, and they are all brave as fuck. Kings getting kidnapped. At one point, Matilda literally has Stephen in chains. Thwarted coronations. There is this one story where Matilda thinks she's won, but then she has to escape this castle in the middle of the night in winter, and she scales the wall of the castle and then escapes across a frozen pond in freezing cold England. Honestly, that could be a movie on its own. Star-crossed lovers. Remember Henry's second wife, Adeliza of Louvain? Everyone assumed she couldn't have babies. Well, her second husband and her had 7 children. And to make it even more cinematic and heartbreaking is they were a love match, but they found themselves on opposite sides of the Civil War. And this drama goes on and on and on, and I completely get why it is an inspiration for a show. Okay, so how does the conflict end? And I honestly don't know. I haven't made it that far in the books, so but this is how it ends for the Anarchy. Eventually, Matilda realizes she is never getting that crown for herself. On top of having a uterus, which, big mistake on your part, Matilda. What were you thinking? She also just wasn't very likable. Like, people weren't rushing to her side because she didn't want to take anybody's advice. She was just not super charming, nice, friendly. Things that probably wouldn't have mattered if she was a man. However, she had a son. He was known at the time as Henry Fitz-Empress, which I love that. And Henry Fitz-Empress had everything his mother didn't have. He was charming. He was handsome. He listened to people. He had a penis. So she decides, okay, if I can't get the crown for myself, I want to secure it for my son, which surprisingly Stephen agrees to. This was shocking to everyone because Stephen had 2 sons. But honestly, I get the vibe that Stephen, he never expected this to turn into this whole thing. And he was tired. And he didn't want his legacy to just be murder, killing peasants, fighting women, war and war and more war. I mean, sorry, Stephen. His legacy is not great. All he's known for is the Anarchy. And you might notice that there is no Stephen II of England. Nobody was rushing to name their son after the clusterfuck king. A year after Stephen names Henry his heir, he dies of natural causes. And Henry Fitz-Empress, aka Henry II of England, ascends the throne. He was very much welcomed, and he started the Angevin Plantagenet dynasty. And hey, if you're like, the Plantagenets, that sounds familiar to me. You might be thinking of something called the Wars of the Roses, which was a civil war between 2 factions of the Plantagenet dynasty, the Starks and the Lannisters. Nope, sorry, scratch that. The Yorks and the Lancasters. Easy mistake, am I right? But I think that is a video for another time. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. And make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And let me know in the comments if you want a deeper dive into anything from this story or any other Game of Thrones universe versus history that you want to learn about. And as we say at Queen's Podcast, cheers, bitches.